If you are tasked with writing technical content for your company and you're not really sure where to start or what process to follow, then you'll definitely want to listen to today's episode. I'm joined with an expert at technical content development, and she'll walk through beginning to end her writing process and provide tips on creating a more efficient process, working with subject matter experts, and how to make the most of this content once it's created. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, TREW Marketing. TREW is a full service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit trewmarketing.com. And now on with our podcast. Hey everyone, I'm here with Morgan Norris. She's a senior brand and content strategist here at TREW Marketing. And she's been on the show many times in the past, so she'll be a familiar voice and face to many of you. And today we'll be talking through the writing process. So welcome to the show, Morgan.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back.
I think this will be a fun episode because we're talking about your favorite subject, which is writing and creating really strong content. So Morgan, why are you so passionate about this subject?
Okay. So writing is critical to content marketing. And I think we know that, but it feels like something that we should easily be able to kind of outsource or just tell somebody else to do it. But the second you sit down to actually write content, you realize just how challenging it can be. And I know you recently talked about the research report, so the state of marketing to engineers, and just the fact there that 62% of those, research respondees, survey respondees, said that they complete more than half the buyer's journey online. So they're looking for content, and they're either going to find your content or they're going to find your competitors' content, and they're going to use that content to decide who they're going to trust and who understands kind of their pain points and who they want to work with. And so you want them to decide on your company. So not only do you need content, but you need really strong content. And I think this is one of the things that parallels well even from our personal lives in the B2C market, right? So we've all downloaded, or maybe it's just me, but those ebooks that have 12 healthy dinners to cook for your family, or how to DIY your own countertops and measure for new ones. And then you download that content and you end up with an ebook that has, 12 variations on macaroni and cheese, and a countertop demo ebook that is basically just a sales pitch for, a new color of quartz. And so in a way, the B2B market is the same. If you're going to create an ebook about HIL simulation for engine testing, and it's targeted to a test engineer, but it's all about your product, or the information's really vague and it's more or less what they've already seen on Wikipedia and a couple articles, they're going to go somewhere else. And that content that you needed for somebody to build trust in you is actually going to become a detractor. And so I just feel very strongly about, marketers really investing in their writing skills so that the content they're creating is good.
And it sounds like that content needs to be very specific to meeting someone's pain points and light on the promotional aspects of trying to push a particular solution.
Yes, absolutely.
So we agree in it here on some basic principles and obviously the importance of content. But I know where a lot of marketers struggle in companies at large is just the process. It's difficult to create technical content. It does take a lot of time, and just where to start, staring at that blank Word document on your desk. How does a company go from figuring out that they need to write, they need to create content, and actually getting words on the page?
Yep. It's a huge barrier. And we've all sat there. I mean, I'll walk you through kind of the process that I use and that I have used as recently as this week, right? Because we all sit there and you stare at a blank page and you go, I know I need to write this. Where do I even start? And so, like you mentioned, we need content that's heavily educational and light on the sales process. And I think that a big aspect of that is taking a step back. So I always sit down kind of with what I need to write and take a step back and look at the brand story. And what this is going to do is it's going to help you understand where your customer is. It's going to put you in their shoes. And then it's going to remind you that you're providing a piece of content that's part of their journey. You're not trying to tackle their entire journey in one piece of content. And so if you think about, your favorite movie or book, it's a story that starts with a character. And here, in your piece of content, that character is your prospect, your customer. And you want to really compel them into knowing kind of your brand and their journey. And so first you want to identify who that customer is. I know you've talked about before, and a lot of your listeners know about buyer personas. And so really understanding who's the persona that you're writing this piece of content for, and then unburden yourself from all of the other personas. This piece of content that you're creating does not need to be for everyone at every time. It's going to be for a certain persona at a certain point in their buying journey. And so you can start to ask those questions. What industry are they in? What kind of challenges are they facing? How do they make a purchase decision? What are their biggest frustrations? And so get yourselves in their head, kind of as you're thinking through that. And then from there, you can kind of go through, and I like to take the next step and kind of amplify that problem. What's going to happen if they don't solve it? Are they going to have downtime that then creates a headache for them later? Are they potentially going to lose their job if they don't get this right? Are they going to miss major deadlines where a product doesn't get to market if they can't figure out exactly how to test it? And so figure out kind of where that crux, that problem comes to a head. And then that'll position you to be able to kind of make that customer the hero. You're going to provide a piece of content that is going to help them avoid that kind of deadly end that they don't want. And that's what you're going to create. And then you're going to be able to position your company and your solution as kind of the guide. This piece of content is going to help get them there. And from there, you've taken a step back. You understand where you are in the journey, and you're able to kind of free yourself from being everything to everyone and start getting in the mind frame to really write that content. So that's kind of the first piece, I think.
I see where that would provide a lot of clarity and direction to the writer, whoever's charged with this piece or whatever people. I like the word you said, unburden yourself from covering the entire buyer's journey and every persona, and really narrow this down. And I could see where you'll have a much higher quality piece that's going to speak to someone's pain points if you get that specific. So I like where you're headed with this.
Definitely.
How do you decide what types of content to write?
Yep. So, if you come to me and tell me you need content, we're going to take a step back, figure out kind of where those points are in the buyer's journey that you need that content. And then we identify the piece of content. I think a lot of times people just say, I want to write 20 blog posts. Well, let's look at that and decide kind of where's your biggest need for content and how do you keep people moving through that buyer's journey. And so if you tell me you need 20 blog posts, I'm going to ask you what you're trying to achieve with that, right? So you've got different types of content. Main kind of content pieces I usually focus on are blog posts, ebooks and white papers, case studies, news releases, even corporate slide decks that walk through the overarching kind of corporate brand story. And so we look at those from the perspective of the buyer's journey. You're going to use blog posts and news releases to attract customers, but then you're going to be able to use white papers and ebooks to really convert them, where then you might need final case studies that show hard ROI facts to close those customers. And so it just depends on where you are in the buyer's journey, but really identifying where you are is an important piece of deciding what content to write. And man, just as a reminder, this all happens in the kind of writing process before any words are on the page yet. And so it feels like a lot to kind of sift through at the beginning, but your writing process is going to be so much easier and so much faster and more effective if you make these decisions up front. Because it's pretty difficult if somebody tells you to write a piece of content and they're expecting an ebook and you come up with a few blog posts, you're not going to fill the need that you have. And so really defining kind of where you are in the buyer's journey is helpful.
Before we move on to the writing process, because I can't wait to dive into details, what about thought leadership content such as, contributed articles or long form LinkedIn posts? How do those fit into this process?
Yep. So those definitely fit into that kind of brand story process. For thought leadership in particular, those longer form LinkedIn posts, contributed content, you might be a test engineering company, but it makes sense to seek out some opportunities where you're writing contributed content for a more B2B business type of publication and sharing your thoughts that way. One thing that we really like to do for that is, if you're really approaching thought leadership, is sit down and decide what messages you have some leadership over. So to be a thought leader is not to be a thought leader in everything. So the same thing where we're talking about identifying kind of your company narrative and what point your buyers are in the journey. As far as a thought leader, I really always encourage our executive leadership that we work with we sit and figure out what are kind of 3 topics that you are really ahead on and can provide a lot of value to people who are companies who are smaller, companies who were in your shoes 2, 3, 5 years ago, and we'll identify those topics and come up with some key messages around those. And then what are the supporting bullets? What are, maybe you might need a case study to show your thought leadership in a certain area, but we really decide what those messages are first before we start to just jump into content for those.
So same thing, a lot of thoughtful discussion and narrowing the field down where you're unburdening yourself again from trying to be everything to everyone, but picking those specific areas of expertise.
Definitely. And this comes up, this is a little bit of a tangent, but this comes up a lot on, we'll have executive leaders chosen for panels and things like that. And so just making sure if we've got that messaging for them already, that they're going back to the areas where they're key on, because you're going to get, if you're vastly a thought leader in one area, I want you to spend 90% of your time talking about that versus 90% of your time answering general questions and 10% of your time talking about the thing that you're specialized in. We want to focus on what you're really, really good at.
So key theme, focus. So let's then focus in on the actual writing process. So you're ready to start typing. What are the key steps here, Morgan? What process do you follow?
You are ready. So you have identified what type of content you're going to write. You have a topic now that because you know where you are in the buyer's journey. And now you've got to research. And so through all the research that we've done, we see that engineers trust content created by engineers every time, right? So they want content that's created by a trustworthy source. That does not mean that the engineer has to write the words on the page. But that means that their mind and expertise needs to be fueling what's in that content. As a writer, as a marketing writer in particular, you're going to make that content organized, easy to read. You're going to make it really easy to digest for a prospect. And so we want to leverage the subject matter experts that we have. This is a touchy process. So what happens is your engineers they might be the expert in, I used hardware and loop simulation earlier. So they might be your HIL simulation expert, and you've identified a gap that you need some content around this topic. And so now you need to go to the SMEs and work with them to figure out kind of the answers to your questions and really understand, pain points their customers are having, how to solve them, how to think about them. So what you want to do is reach out to those subject matter experts. Engineers they're going to work one of two ways. Either they'll want to write down their answers so that everything's exactly correct and send them to you that way, or they'll be really they'll get major writer's block and when they have to go write something out specifically. And so they'll need to talk to you through it. It's your job as a writer to understand how they communicate best and adapt to that, right? So you're the writer, you're the communicator, you're the marketer, you can adapt. You got to get the information out of their head the easiest way possible that you can get that. And so that's really important. You want to make their life as easy as possible. They are doing, highly billable technical skills. They're working with customers on projects. And so be as efficient as possible. And some of those things are ask for source material beforehand, get any data sheets, product info, anything they've provided to sales before, so that you know exactly where you need more information, and ask them about that. I also love, and ask them what they're reading. Ask them what the most difficult customer challenge they've faced this week is. And you'll start to get into their heads a little bit about what's important. And I think that's really helpful, provides a lot of color to the pieces that you're writing. Other ways to research are industry publications, looking at kind of their customers' work, what their customers are trying to achieve. Doing any of your background research kind of on Wikipedia. I always make a note, if there's something that my subject matter expert is talking about as if it is a commonplace topic, but it's not something I've heard of yet, I'll just jot it down and assume I can go research it later.
Rather than ask questions that you can find. Yeah.
Yes.
You can find it elsewhere. Don't waste their time.
Don't waste their time. If it's not proprietary information out of their head, just keep going. I like if we're doing this on a call where I'm just verbally getting the information, I'll record it so I can go back and listen. But those are kind of all ways to research and then keep their time as brief as possible. And then once you've got your research, you want to plan out your piece of content. So this looks like some form of outlining. Now for blogs or white papers or ebooks, you'll do kind of a formal outline. And then for things like corporate slide decks, you might want to do more of a storyboard where you're kind of going, section 1, section 2, section 3, different slides. But the outlines, you'll see, you go back through your notes and what topics overall kind of bubbled up, and start just reorganizing your information. And there you'll probably find you've still got some gaps and you need to either fill those in with the research that you're already doing or going back to that subject matter expert with a few specific questions. I like to just ask those questions standalone. I don't show them the content till I'm ready for them to look at it. But I'm gonna go ahead and just ask them a few targeted questions to fill out my outline with details, right? Because we may have decided that there are these few key topics that are coming up, but then my last topic I know is important. We had talked about it. I know it's important, but I don't have any of the hard facts that go underneath it, right? Or they had mentioned regulations, but we didn't ever talk about what exact regulations those were. Now I know that I need them. And so I can go back and ask those specific questions. And then from there, we'll start to add in kind of figure out any, again, just gaps we have. So is there a specific application that we can highlight that would show this point? Can we show the idea rather than just, telling it? Are there images that we can use? And so we'll start to think about what those are going to look like. And then we'll start to work on a headline and really create a headline that is going to compel that reader at the spot that they're at in their buyer's journey. So general research shows that it's like 60% of readers don't make it past the headline, and you have about 8 seconds to catch somebody's interest. And so the headline is going to be really important for engineers, for technical audiences. The headline cannot be a superlative. So the headline cannot be the best way, fastest.
Come on, Morgan.
It can't.
But it's the best. It's the most innovative.
They will never, and don't use the word innovative. They will never read it, right? So because they know that driven by fact and they know that that's not true. There's some other solution, or they assume that by the point they read the article that your superlative is outdated. And so you've got to be really factual in that headline, but go back to the pain points that you identified when you were telling that story in the beginning and include those pain points in the headline so that you're really meeting them where they are in the challenge that they're facing, and tell them you're gonna give them a path to a solution. And then lastly, kind of in that writing process, you want to just review your company's tone and voice, because often what happens is you've got multiple people within a company writing content that's going to be branded for the company. And so ideally, all that content should sound like it came from the same company. And so if the subject matter expert that you talked to was extremely, casual in their conversation, that doesn't mean that the piece you write should be casual. It should mimic the tone and voice of your company. Do you use a lot of, second person you type of language, or as a company, are you, very didactic and technical? Make sure that comes through in your writing.
A lot of things for the writer to balance.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a connection to the overall marketing strategy that happened at the beginning when you have persona development and thinking about how to connect this to, where this piece fits in the buyer's journey and bringing in, the company and differentiators and things like that.
Yeah.
But one thing, and this is a very tactical question, but also the writer needs to think tactically about optimization, right? How will this piece end up being published? And so as they're writing, how will the piece be found? And it made me think about this when you were talking about headlines. So how does the writer keep an eye towards optimization as they're crafting the piece?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I think to keep in mind is you want to write for the reader first, and then for the robot, right? So we
humans first,
humans first, because we've all read something that sounds like it's written for SEO as well. But I do like to ask the subject matter expert when we're gathering information, just, what kinds of terms are people looking for? I ask them a lot of times, are there non-negotiable terms for this piece where we've got to focus on this topic? Or, in kind of the initial process with clients, is there any disconnect between terms? Is there something, does our company call it this, but everybody else calls it that?
If so, see that happening.
For the marketing, for the piece that's trying to attract people and bring them in, we need to call it what they call it. Who cares what we call it internally? We've got and this happens a lot in technical companies where we create proprietary processes or solutions. For example, a technical company might create a process for how they handle product design and test, and they call it the peaks test process. Okay. No one cares. So
yeah, no one knows what that is.
No one knows. And and so it doesn't make sense. It's not a process someone is going to purchase. It's not a product you're trying to promote. It's not something somebody's going to purchase. It's internally how you've created that. It's awesome. I'm sure it creates a lot of consistency for your teams internally. Don't create a white paper around why we use the peaks process, because no one's looking for that, right? So a way that you can pivot from that, because your process might be amazing and it might be the reason that people end up working with you, and so you need more people to know about it. But that white paper should instead be titled something like, 5 critical aspects to product design and test that you may not have in your process. Something like that, where then in that white paper, you walk through the whole process. And then at the end you say, we do this every single time, and we call it Peaks Test. And here are the key aspects of it. And here's a quote from 3 of our customers saying why this benefited them so much. And so that's what that content looks like. But writing, writing the headline for that looks like writing something that your prospects are actually searching for.
Benefits oriented. Yeah. Terminology that's readily used. Oh gosh. Great example, Morgan. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So back to the writing process. It's fun. So now we have a written piece. It's, let's say, in the Word document, and writer's feeling pretty good about it. What happens next? There's an editing process, I'm sure. And with technical pieces, does that look different than editing for, say, a B2C blog post or article?
Yep. So I think a B2C type topic, you could turn over to just any editor the facts, and it would be pretty easy to check if there are any. But this technical piece, you're going to have to go back to your subject matter expert and have them review it one more time. And you want to set expectations for this. So a few things that I always like to do are, I'll send a document over and say, this is ready. As a reminder, here was the topic of this piece, and here's the intention of it. Because you and I went through that whole process where we identified where in the buyer's journey this piece fits. They don't know that. And so we need to remind them of, this is what we're trying to accomplish with this piece. So you don't need to add in a bunch of extra things that aren't, if they're not in this piece, it's likely intentional. And so you want to set the expectation for them of what you're asking for. And typically I ask that they fact check accuracy, and they make sure the flow makes sense to the potential reader who's having this specific pain point that we identified. You'll have some people who just want to really mark up writing in general. Not a good use of their time. So, you're the marketer, you're the writer, this is your area of expertise. So because of that, I usually set a time expectation. So if it's a blog post, I'll tell them 25 minutes tops that they should spend on this, 20 to 25 minutes. If it's something like a white paper, they're going to maybe need 45 to 60 minutes to review it. So that doesn't allow for them time to add a bunch of commas where we don't need them. But it does allow for time where they can go through and check facts and check flow, and then circle back with me on that. And I'll highlight areas. If there are specific areas that I know I have a question about, just go ahead and highlight those so that they focus on those areas. And then you get the piece back, and now it needs edited. Now, ideally, you've got somebody else on your team on your marketing team who can read through it. It's really hard to edit your own work, but it's definitely doable. And it's definitely the situation for a lot of people. You don't have somebody else to edit it. So what we do for editing is I have kind of a whole checklist cheat sheet that I run through just to make sure. And I'll share kind of a few of the key things, but biggest things that stand out in your work are, you wrote something technical, there's likely a bulleted list somewhere. Go through and make sure your bullets have parallel structure. And what that means is every bullet in a series should be able to complete the same sentence seamlessly. So if I say, this podcast includes information on, and then a colon, everything in that list should complete the sentence, this podcast includes information on X. And so that means they either all start with a verb or they don't, so they should all flow together. So go through and do that. Those often get, even if you had them in a good spot before you send it over for editing, if it was specs or something like that, likely if some details got edited, then your bullet structure is lost. And it just makes your piece read so much better. The other thing is edit out passive voice. So I'll give you kind of a good, better, best. You could have a sentence that says, this module is helping engineers. The sentence there isn't very powerful. Is helping is passive voice, you're adding in extra words. So a better sentence would be, this module helps engineers. And actually the best sentence would be putting the action in the engineer. So you want your person reading, your prospect reading this content to be able to sit in the shoes of somebody succeeding in the problem that they're having. And so you want to say, with this module, engineers can. And that it sounds a little nitpicky, but it makes a huge difference to the reader that they don't even know about. It's the difference between the module being the hero and that engineer who's reading that piece, seeing that they can be the hero. If I get this module, I can solve my problems. And so eradicating that passive voice and then putting the subject as the active person kind of in your piece it's the difference between a piece that reads okay and something that reads really strongly where you can't quite put your finger on it. That's a big piece. So
you're bringing me back to my days in college.
Yeah, right.
I studied journalism, and I remember all this. A lot of red lines through these passive sentences.
Yeah.
Also way back in the day, we used to write towards the lead, like making sure you grab someone right out of the gate. Is that principle still apply outside of newspapers?
So I would say yes. So the lead is important as it always has been. And that lead is the thesis of what you're going to get across in the piece. And then what is, I think, now of equal importance as we have moved towards just massive amounts of content and scannability is the subheadlines that are included in that content.
Ooh, good one.
And so you think about when you look at something, you look at an article, you read those first couple sentences and they tell you what they're going to tell you, but then you go look at those subheadlines and go, is this actually what I'm going to need? And so
scanning, that's so easy, right? To just quickly scan. People may skip over that first paragraph.
Even in something long, like an 8-page white paper, those subheadlines are still hugely important. Somebody's going to just flip through that and go, oh yeah, this is going to be valuable for me to read. So those are important to break up the text, but also to show that you know what you're talking about and you know what you're going to walk them through in the piece.
Okay. All right. Well, so the content is written, it's edited. Now we're really feeling happy with it. How do we get from this Word document to a promotion ready piece?
Yeah. So now you've got it. You feel like you're done and you got the home stretch. So, you think about a white paper, a case study or something like that you've downloaded. It's got a design aspect to it. It needs some images and it needs CTAs. So they need to know where they're going to go next after they read this. So as far as design, the barrier to good design has been lowered so much over the last even 5 years. So you can purchase templates, you can purchase PowerPoint templates, you can purchase, if you have InDesign, you can purchase InDesign, but that even InDesign was there's such a barrier, cost and functionality, and it's overkill for a lot of things that technical companies and writers need to do. You can even design stuff in Word, but there are free tools like Canva where you can go in and do a quick layout. You can add your kind of style and branding colors in, and you want to include images, include captions with your images. Ideally, you'll have images, if you're talking about a product, of the actual product versus kind of use stock imagery sparingly, but you want to have real world images ideally. One note though about design is you want to have your content completely done before you put it in design, because the second you start adding visual elements, it makes it really hard to go back and edit the text. So just make sure you're done, but then add in images and then CTAs. So you want a very clear next step. If it's a blog post, you can include, inline links throughout the post to more information, but then you want a solid CTA at the end. If somebody read this, what should they do next? And so again, that takes you back to that that narrative story. Where are they? And what's next for them? And because you identified that narrative story to begin with, that's a really easy question to answer. You know exactly where they are, and you know what their next point is, what the next piece of information they need is. So give them that. And then lastly, you want to be a really good coworker to whoever you're handing this off to promote. And that may be you if you're doing this, if you're end to end. We've all been there, and you've got to do it all on your own. But you want to create some kind of promotional graphic for that text, and then the sort of 140 character type of text that will go with that. So what we find happens often is somebody does all the writing and all this hard work, and you created this white paper that's 10 pages and it's wonderful. But then you just hand it over to this brand new intern, and they're supposed to post it on social media. Well, they don't know that you just spent 3 weeks with this topic. They don't know the topic. And even if best case scenario, they're going to read the entire thing and then stew over what to write in their 140 characters, you write it. So when you hand that off, you hand it off with, an image. Hop into Canva, put the piece title in a graphical image, include one of the images that you used in the piece, and make that little designed image in Canva, and then hand that over along with that 140 type character little tease that says why somebody should click to read this. And so that's an important last step that gets forgotten. And for that reason, then for the same reason that, we sit at our writing desk and go, oh my gosh, what am I going to create? Don't put that headache on the next person so that they're saying, oh my gosh, how in the world am I going to promote this? Just give them the tools, and then it makes it so easy and saves so much time.
I could see how much more efficient that is. The writer is so close to that material. They're going to know what to extract out. And I would think it's not just one post, but maybe several, right? And give it some legs. This does seem like a mistake that companies make. They spend all this time creating that piece of content and then fail when it comes to the promotion part. So I'm glad you touched on this.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, Morgan, I feel like we could have talked like for hours and hours about the writing process. So I know we've a little bit scratched the surface. So where can our listeners and viewers go to find resources to help with their next writing project?
Yep. So we're going to do a webinar on March 25th. It's called How to Write Content That Converts Technical Audiences. And if you're looking for just more resources and some visuals, we'll walk through a lot of examples of the type of process that we just talked about. That webinar is going to do it. So it's, again, March 25th. If you go to trewmarketing.com/writing webinar, then there's a sign up for it right there. It's free. And it's a great resource for marketers or even engineers that are looking to kind of create content, or engineers who are having to work with marketing teams and writers a lot of times really appreciate just kind of hearing what the process looks like. And so as well, marketing teams. So this is a good kind of opportunity as a webinar for like a lunch and learn, right? To all kind of level up, get on the same page with the process and what it looks like to really create solid content. And then after that, in late April, we're actually launching Content Writing Engineered, a course with complete lessons as well as live coaching for participants, where people will actually create an entire piece of content. And for some people, you hear what we just talked about, attend the webinar, and the webinar might be enough to just get you started, get you on the right page, get your head in the right spot, start creating content. But for others, really you need somebody to walk you through that process and get the coaching along the way, right? So we'll teach you exactly how to create an outline, and then you're going to create it, and then we'll talk to you about it and how to strengthen it. And that course it starts April 19th. It's a 5-week course. Every week there's somewhere between like 1 and 3 hours of on-demand instruction that you'll be able to go through. And then you'll have an assignment that you do, and the assignments each week build on each other, so that at the end you have this final designed promotable piece of content. And then every week during the course on Fridays, we'll have a 1-hour live group coaching session where we'll talk through strengthening all the things that you're creating. And so it'll be a really beneficial opportunity for that. And that's people creating, blog posts, white papers, ebooks, case studies, news releases, corporate slide decks, interactive content. It's all of these content types that are necessary through that buyer's journey. So the course does have limited availability, but it's available for sign up today.
I love that it's a group setting, and then it's facilitated so you can get feedback as you walk through the process and start to create these deliverables, but also talk to other people that are in the same, situation as you are, learning how to improve their writing, working in at technical companies where often you might be the only marketer.
Definitely.
Are those the types of people that should take the course, the solo marketer, or are there other types of people that it would benefit?
Yep. So if you are on your own, tasked with a lot of times, and I feel for you, if you're on your own tasked with creating content, you probably have to plan and promote the content too. And so this is definitely a course for you, as well as marketing teams doubling down on just creating more content and all getting on the same page. And so I've been asked if teams of people can take it together, and that answer is definitely yes. So we know we've experienced this for sure with our clients and in our own careers, but it is really hard to train technical writers. And so a piece of this course as well is just being able to kind of have a team, take some seats together and learn and have that professional development and training together. And then if you manage a team of people like that, at the end of it, you're going to get a piece of content from every single person who took the course. And so, yeah, so we price the course at sort of a fraction of the cost that you spend outsourcing that piece of content.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get the coaching along the way. The other thing is we'll have the lessons available for a year after you take the course. And so you can go through, go through the entire course, get your coaching, create your wonderful piece of content, but you're not alone when you start the next content piece. You can just walk yourself back through those courses. And so really trying to create that repeatable success in a content marketing program for people.
Great.
So, and I don't think so that course is, if you go to truemarketing.com/writing course, you'll see all the course information. truemarketing.com/writing webinar has the webinar information for March 25th.
Okay. And I'll be sure to include those links in our show notes, which you can find at truemarketing.com/podcast. So I write a blog on each of these episodes, has all the resources and transcript and all sorts of fun stuff. So,
awesome.
Well, Morgan, how can people connect with you if they have questions, want more information?
Yeah. If you have questions about the webinar or the course specifically, you can reach out to me directly, Morgan at truemarketing.com. We've gotten just a lot of questions about it and are happy to chat with you if it's just to see if it's a good fit. We talk to you about your goals and stuff. So feel free to reach out to me directly.
All right. Well, any last parting advice for writers about to tackle their first or next piece?
Yeah, and get started. So the best time to start was 2 weeks ago, and then the next best time is today. So jump in and start, because just staring at that blank page, get some resources under your belt, start with that story narrative, and really just break through the initial step of getting some words down on your page. So you can do it. And it'll really boost your marketing program. So,
all right. Thank you for your time today, Morgan. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.